Can you actually change your destiny, or is your whole life already written out for you? It's a huge question, right? Well, welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to impartially explore a really unique spiritual framework that attempts to answer that exact question about human agency. We're going to be unpacking a fascinating text today that blends some wildly diverse philosophies into one single, comprehensive worldview.
Okay, let's dive into this. The text we're looking at is called Intermediate Self-Improvement. It's a core guide to the Lifechanyuan Philosophy, authored by someone named Shui Feng. And it takes a highly syncretic approach to self-improvement. What that means is it essentially weaves together ideas from Christianity, Buddhism, Taoism, and even modern scientific concepts, kind of fusing them all together to create a completely distinct path for spiritual seekers.
So to navigate this highly complex metaphysical text today, we're going to follow a structured roadmap, kind of a seeker's journey. We've got 4 stops. 1. Cosmic forces and origins. 2. Navigating fate and fortune. 3. Transcending the mundane. And finally, 4. The ultimate spiritual state.
All right, let's start right at the beginning with part 1, cosmic forces and origins. Because to understand the human experience in this text, we actually have to look outward at the universe first.
So the crucial point is that this framework rests on 2 massive cosmic pillars. First, the text identifies the greatest creator, which it defines as the supreme energy center of the supermaterial world, basically the ultimate cradle of life. Then you have the Tao. Now, it's described here not just as some abstract philosophy, but as the strict, objective, cosmic law of cause and effect. The text insists that the Tao acts as this invisible, impartial arbiter of retribution. If you do something unethical, the Tao guarantees an equivalent consequence, and it operates completely independently of whatever you or I might want.
Now, you might be wondering where regular science fits into all this. Well, the philosophy presents this really fascinating duality. It says followers absolutely must respect conventional science because it solves our everyday material issues, it's essential for earthly survival, it feeds billions of people. But the text argues that science has a ceiling. To reach higher planes of existence, what the author specifically calls the 19th to 36th dimensions, you literally have to rely on what they call superscience. And this superscience is said to transcend time and space entirely to access eternity.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the wildly unconventional history the text lays out for the origins of Eastern spirituality. Get this, it claims that Eastern peoples are actually the descendants of dragons who came to Earth way back during the dinosaur era. According to this framework, a divine plague wiped out all the dinosaurs, but a pair of dragons managed to hide in a cave. They transformed into humans to avoid the divine punishment, and eventually they migrated down to India. And that is exactly how the text accounts for the unique origins of Buddhism and figures like Siddhartha Gautama, presenting them essentially as seekers trying to atone and find their way back to their heavenly homeland.
Okay, shifting gears now to part 2, navigating fate and fortune. We're zooming in from the cosmic scale right down to human agency and the things we can actually control. Have you ever felt completely stuck by your circumstances, like you were just dealt a bad hand in life? Well, the source material makes a really sharp distinction here. It argues that your destiny is split into 2 distinct parts. First is fate, and fate is entirely predetermined. You literally cannot change your genetics, the era you were born into, or the environment you were born into. But then there's fortune, and fortune is highly changeable. It's dictated by your character, your education, and the people you intentionally choose to associate with. So the text's ultimate stance is you can't choose your starting hand, but your fortune, that is entirely in your control.
So how do we actually improve that fortune? The text outlines a specific 3-level methodology called self-rescue. Step 1 is life. That means taking practical, intelligent action in the real world. Start a business, learn a trade. Don't just sit around waiting. Step 2 is spirit, which means focusing heavily on physical health to cultivate your inner vital essence. And step 3 is soul, which is about maintaining a deep, unshakable yearning for truth and goodness, even when things get tough. The core takeaway here is that heaven only helps those who actively use their own intelligence to lift themselves up, both materially and spiritually.
And this brilliantly illustrates the point using a super grounded analogy from the author. Think of a really well-maintained truck. If you regularly change the oil, check the spark plugs, keep the engine clean, that truck is going to power right up a steep hill without breaking a sweat, right? Well, the text argues the human body works the exact same way. Doing the daily work of physical health maintenance generates this vital energy, which translates directly into serious spiritual resilience.
Which brings us right into part 3,
transcending the mundane.
In this stage, we hit a deeply paradoxical idea. To actually transcend ordinary, worldly life, you first have to completely embrace it. The text contrasts two states, engaging the world versus disengaging. Engaging means diving headfirst into human society, experiencing all the messy struggles, the intense loves, the bitter failures, the humiliations. Disengaging, on the other hand, is this advanced mental state where you observe the material world as if you've already passed away. You're completely unbothered by worldly attachments. But here's the catch. The text asserts a strict order. You absolutely cannot successfully disengage from the world until you have thoroughly suffered and engaged with it first. It says trying to disengage without first living a full, messy life is literally like trying to climb a wall without a ladder. It just doesn't work.
The author actually shares this really striking little anecdote to drive this home. It's about an old monk warning a young, completely inexperienced monk who's about to go down the mountain. The old monk tells him, "The women down there are like man-eating tigers. Quickly avoid them." Now, the old monk knows this because he's already lived in the world. He understands the very real pitfalls of attachment. But for the young monk, he's never experienced worldly temptations, so to him, the tigers just look charming. The point being made impartially here is that true, deep detachment is impossible without getting first-hand experience of the world's temptations.
And this flows into the philosophy's unique view on finding the extraordinary hidden right inside the ordinary. The text compares a truly enlightened person to a delicate blade of grass growing out in the harsh Gobi Desert. On the surface, that little patch of grass looks totally insignificant, but underneath, it conceals this invincible, unyielding energy that allows it to survive freezing cold nights and scorching hot days. In human terms, the philosophy claims that truly powerful people don't need to show off or act tough. They appear entirely ordinary, yet they remain as unmovable and completely unbothered by external pressure as that tough little desert grass.
Let's move on and see how this builds directly into the practice of visualization. Now, the text is very careful to define this not as simple daydreaming, but as vivid, unconscious mental images that inevitably materialize into reality in the near future. It argues that this phenomenon is actually a function of what it calls the negative universe, this unseen energetic realm where your serene, unforced mental images basically act as a coming attraction for the reality you're destined to step into. The author shares this incredibly intense personal story to explain how these deep visualizations can be unlocked. Apparently, while driving at 165 kilometers per hour, the author literally fell asleep at the wheel and crashed straight into a concrete milestone. Against all odds, they survived, completely unscathed, and this extreme near-death experience prompted them to intensely study spiritual texts. According to the framework, that deep spiritual dedication is what finally unlocked a flow of unconscious mental images, bridging a much deeper connection to these unseen universal forces. The source material even provides specific, real-world examples of this visualization in action. Back in 1980, the author envisioned living in a very specific garden house, and that exact house materialized 8 years later. A colleague had a similar experience envisioning a pool villa years before actually getting one in Zimbabwe. There's even a story about unconscious visualization paving the way for a child to get into a U.S. university. But the text emphasizes a massive caveat here. These visions must arise naturally. You have to be in a completely serene state, free from material grasping. If you're just doing greedy, forced daydreaming, the text says that absolutely will not work.
All right, we've made it to the final stage of the seeker's journey. Part 4, the ultimate spiritual state.
This is where the text introduces its most radical philosophical concepts, specifically regarding the total dissolution of the self. The markers it lays out for achieving this ultimate state are pretty extreme. It says wars and massive human suffering simply do not affect you anymore. You feel no sadness at the death of your loved ones. You have zero fear of going bankrupt, or even of your own death. And eventually, you develop this profound inability to even distinguish between you, me, and them. The text neutrally presents this total detachment, this complete loss of worldly emotional humanity as the true final attainment of Buddha nature.
So, what does this all mean? We're left to ponder this massive, provocative question raised by the framework. If achieving ultimate enlightenment actually means losing all of your attachment and all of your emotional reaction to the external world, do we transcend our humanity or do we simply lose it? It's a profound and genuinely challenging duality presented by this philosophy. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.